Hello guys, it's Ege from the Ottoman History Hub, and last month we hit 10,000 subscribers on the channel, and finally, as requested, here's the Q&A video. Thank you for all the support, it really means a lot. Our first question comes from Maglodan, and thank you for the very kind words, and he actually asked many questions, so let's get into it. When will the next Ottoman Sultan episodes and Ottoman War episodes come out? Well, this question was written a month ago, and I'm pretty sure that the Ottoman Wars episode about the Byzantine Civil War of 1352 came out after this comment. But the next episode that I'm planning for that series will be covering the first years of Sultan Murat I's reign and the fall of the Serbian Empire, and how the Ottomans expanded rapidly in the Balkans during the 1370s and 1380s. As for the next Ottoman Sultan episode, it will of course be about Yavuz Sultan Selim I, Selim the Grim, will probably be my next major video on the channel. And will he do more Ottoman memes? Maybe in the future. And now for the alternative questions, alright? What if the Ottomans won the Siege of Vienna in 1529 and 1683? Well, I definitely think if the Ottomans won in 1529, it would have been a more decisive victory. The Ottomans were in their golden age during the 16th century. Of course, you had Sultan Suleiman, the Magnificent, leading the army. Europe was basically on fire with its religious wars, and there would have been probably less resistance to the Ottomans compared to the siege in 1683. Of course, you gotta remember, in the siege of 1683, the Polish Commonwealth, many states from the Holy Roman Empire also joined to defend Vienna. In my humble opinion, I would say a Ottoman victory in 1683 would be short-lived, as I kind of see the Ottomans not holding on to Vienna for that long, as the many coalition forces would probably repulse the Ottomans eventually from Austria. With these types of questions, you can never know 100% sure how certain events would go if things were changed, so I'm just making my humble guesses for these next questions. The next question is, what if Shahzadeh Mustafa succeeded Sultan Suleiman or any other Ottoman prince besides Selim or Cihangir? This is a very interesting question. You have to remember that Shahzadeh Mustafa would have been the oldest ascending Ottoman Sultan if he had ascended to the throne in 1566. I think he died in his 40s, didn't he? And of course, Sultan Suleiman died 13 years after Mustafa's death, so he would have been in his 50s by 1566. We all know that the lifespan of Ottoman sultans during the specific period was very short. Many of them died during their 50s, and that was basically due to their diets and other passed over genetic diseases from their predecessors. And this would have probably given Shahzadeh Mustafa probably 10 years on the throne, which is probably not that long to overall change the course of Ottoman history. Of course, we do not know how his sons would have behaved if they ascended to the throne one day. Maybe they were talented like their father, or maybe they were subpar like Sultan Murat III and Sultan Mehmet III. Of course, if Shahzadeh Mustafa did ascend to the throne after his father's death, he would have most likely look to the west and not the east like Sultan Murat III, which could have seen a potential Ottoman conquest of Morocco, which could have led to the Ottomans establishing colonies in the New World. But of course, we do not know if the Ottomans would have even been interested in establishing colonies in the New World, so it's very hard to say what would have happened if Shahzadeh Mustafa ascended to the Ottoman throne instead of Selim. The next question is, what if Sultan Mehmet II lived for another 10 to 20 years and died during the 1490s and 1500s? A Ottoman invasion of Italy would have probably occurred during this time period. Of course, right before Mehmet II's death, a Ottoman invasion of Italy was already happening in Toronto, and this invasion would probably have continued if Sultan Mehmet II didn't suddenly die in 1481. And of course, during the aftermath of his death, a Ottoman civil war occurred, which cancelled the Italian campaign, and most likely the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt would have probably lived on for another few more decades, as Sultan Mehmet II was far more concerned with developments in the west than in the east. His main goal after the conquest of Constantinople was to eventually conquer Rome itself, and I believe Mehmet II wouldn't even bother going on campaigns in the east, as he was far more focused on conquering new lands in Europe. Again, you would never know how this would play out in the next 300 years of Ottoman history, because such players as Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, his father Selim I, those figures would probably not have been even Sultan if Mehmet II had reigned for another extra 20 years. Of course, we do not know how events would have played out, it's just my educational guess on the matter. The next question is, what if the Ottomans conquered all of continental Europe, including the Nordic countries and the British Isles, and Western Russia, and etc.? I have no idea. Alright, so let's just say the Ottomans somehow managed to conquer all of Europe and parts of Russia. How would they follow up on their conquest there? They would probably expand into Africa pretty soon, maybe even go to the east, conquer the Safavids, maybe link up with the Mughals of India, and maybe even potentially invade China. I have no idea what would have happened if the Ottomans conquered all of continental Europe. The next question is, what if the Young Turk Revolution was crushed by Sultan Abdulhamid II, and what would have happened if he ruled till his death? Would the Ottoman Empire survive, or would it have crumbled? Well, of course, Abdulhamid II died in 1918, but I'm pretty sure he died a couple of months before the end of World War I, so he would have probably not seen the death of the Ottoman Empire, but maybe he would have lived longer if he was still in charge. You just don't know. I feel like the Ottoman Empire would have probably ended even if the Young Turk Revolution was crushed. You have to remember that the Ottoman Empire was becoming, well, I shouldn't say becoming, it was basically a failed state by the 1900s compared to European standards, of course, and I don't think it could have competed with European powers for that long, and perhaps it would have been dragged into World War I eventually, and if it hadn't joined in 1914, it probably would have joined in 1915, 1916, and it would have been on its own accord, like in real history. I just do not see the empire surviving for that long, but if Abdulhamid II did reign during this time period, it would have probably meant that many figures during the Turkish Independence War would have probably not been active as military officers during the time period, which would have meant the Republic of Turkey would have probably not even existed. In my humble opinion, again, I think the Ottoman Empire was doomed to fall eventually, and I don't think it would have survived any longer if Abdulhamid II was in charge. Thank you once again, Megalodon, for the questions. Our next question comes from Savage Bay, and he asked 3 questions. Did the Kayız/Ottomans fight the Mongols during the reign of Osman I? No. The Ottomans during the 1280s and the 1290s, and even going into the 1300s, they predominantly fought against the Byzantines in the west. Of course, you gotta remember the Mongol Empire had collapsed by then. The Mongol remnant state of the Ilkhanate, which operated from Iran, it was still in charge of Anatolia, but its influence over the region was on the decline. Of course, the Sultanate of Rum was dissolved during the reign of Osman I, and there was little Mongol presence in western Anatolia by this time period. Of course, the Ottomans paid tribute to the Ilkhanate, and I'm almost positive that they stopped paying during the reign of Orhan Gazi. But no, they did not bravely fight off the Mongols like some TV shows depict them to do as. Alright, the next question is, can you tell us more about the details of the Battle of Enegül in 1299? I actually made a video about this topic almost a year ago, I believe, so I'll quickly leave a clip from that video running right now. During the 1290s, Osman Ghazi's power in the region started to scare local Byzantine governors, which thought it was only a matter of time that Osman Ghazi would conquer their holdings too. Some of these governors, like the Byzantine governors of Yaroslav and Bilecik, start making alliances with each other and plans of trying to get rid of Osman Gazi. These two Byzantine governors would plan a wedding amongst their families, and they would invite Osman Gazi to this wedding as a way to capture and kill him. However, during the eve of the wedding, Kursa Mihal informed Osman Gazi about this trap, so Osman Gazi started making his own plans to get rid of the Byzantine governors. During the day of the wedding, Osman sent carts of gifts and trading goods to Bilecik, but unknown to the Byzantines, Osman's best soldiers hid inside these carts in order to capture Bilecik while the wedding was taking place outside the city. Osman's plan worked, and the walled city of Bilecik was captured by his men while he was feasting at the wedding. When news of the Ottoman capture of Bilecik got to the wedding, Osman and his men made ready for battle. The shocked and confused Byzantine governors hearing of this news decided to confront Osman, and a mini battle commenced. The battle was a one-sided affair which saw the governor of Bilecik die during the combat while the other Byzantine governors that were at the wedding were captured. Osman Gazi would send his warriors to capture the city of Yaroslav the next day while he had the governor of Yaroslav imprisoned. Osman also sent a contingent of his men to capture the castle of Enegül led by his commander Turgutal. The shocked and unprepared Byzantines, not knowing of Osman's actions at the wedding, surrendered the city. In only a couple of days, Osman Gazi had captured 3 major Byzantine cities, which further elevated his celebrity status within the Sultanate of Rum. And the last question is, what inspired you to make videos, I guess I'll just change up the question there. It started as a hobby, believe it or not. I just love history and I love making videos, so I just combined both of those hobbies into one, and ta-da, I got this YouTube channel. Our next question comes from Rox Rodin, and first he congratulates us and thank you so much for the kind words, and he's been a viewer for almost 2 years, nearly 2 years, and he loves the videos. Thank you so much for the support, dude. Appreciate it. And he asks a couple of questions. What's your favorite empire in history aside from the Ottomans? It has to be the Roman Empire. I find the entire history of the Romans to be very, very fascinating. I also have a poster in my room commemorating the reigns of the various Roman emperors over the years, right next to my Ottoman Sultans poster, which basically indicates how much I love Roman history. And if you guys also like Roman history, I would happily recommend Eastern Roman History and SPQR Historian on YouTube. They make marvelous videos about various parts of Roman history, and what can I say? Go check them out. The next question is, who's the most inspiring ruler in the Ottoman Empire? It would definitely be Sultan Mehmed II. I mean, the dude conquered Constantinople when he was 21, and I am gonna turn 21 in a couple of weeks, so yeah, kinda depressing, ain't it? The next question is, do you think the stagnation of the Ottoman Empire started with the death of Suleiman the Magnificent, or with the defeat of the Second Siege of Vienna, or even with the signing of the Treaty of Kuchuk-Katnaraja? Very interesting question, and of course, with any thesis talking about a decline of an empire, you can't pinpoint any one particular event in the fall of a country. Of course, the Ottomans won battles, lost battles throughout their 600-year history. I wouldn't say Ottoman stagnation happened on the battlefield, but I would instead turn to the political developments of the early 17th century, which saw the Ottoman Empire basically in crisis mode. You had many sultans rise and fall, many died at an early age. The Ottoman Empire's economy was crumbling. The Ottoman army was starting to fall behind European armies, which were starting to change their military tactics during the 30 Years' War. So yeah, I would definitely say the start of the Ottoman stagnation happened sometime during the first half of the 17th century. Alrighty, the next question is, what led you to start your channel and what history channels inspired you to do so? Since I already answered the first part of your question, let's quickly go to your second part. Many channels on YouTube have inspired me to start up my channel. The first that comes into mind is Kings and Generals. You guys probably all know them. Then it would be the Great War channel, World War II. I love Indy Nindel. I think his content is very good, well researched, beautifully animated, and I just love the dude. And the last question from Fox Roden is, do you live in Turkey or the US? I live in the US. Once again, thank you so much, Fox Roden, for all of these fantastic questions, and thank you for the support over these last 2 years. Much love. Alrighty, our next question comes from G Quits, and he asks, do you have any favorite pieces of Ottoman art, paintings, music, anything? Yes, definitely. I love Ottoman miniatures. Ever since I made that series on my channel, I've been just so fascinated about how Ottoman miniatures were crafted, how they were planned out, the events that they represent. They are so colorful and very insightful on how the Ottomans portrayed their own world during the 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. Music-wise, you can never go wrong with some Jettin Dedan. Our next question comes from Forgotten History, and first, thank you for the kind words, and his question is, I would like to know your opinion on Sultan Abdul Hamid, I'm presuming the second, as a sultan, and whether the Young Turks did good for the Ottomans, in your opinion. Well, I probably can't do this question justice in a random Q&A video, but I would have to say that Abdulhamid II and the Young Turks both did positive things for the empire and many negative things for the empire. Overall, I don't really have a good or a bad opinion about the Young Turks or Abdulhamid II. Our next questions come from Harry S. Truman, and he asks, which do you think is better, Mehmet II or his grandson Selim I? Well, as military commanders, I would say Mehmet II, and as Ottoman sultans overall, I would also say Mehmet II. He is my favorite Ottoman sultan for a reason. Alright, the second question is, which do you think is the most successful Grand Vizier of all time? I would say, from the top of my head right now, I would say Pargali Ibrahim Pasha. He had a very long tenure as Grand Vizier. I think he served as Grand Vizier for 15 years, I'm pretty sure. And during those years, he achieved many achievements on battlefields, at home. And yeah, Pargali Ibrahim Pasha would be my pick. Alright, third question. According to Google, it says Ibrahim was the most horrible sultan. In your opinion, is that true, or actually, there are worse than him? I would definitely rank Ibrahim as one of the worst sultans in Ottoman history. But to say he was the worst one, I think I would give that title to either Mustafa the First, Mustafa the Fourth, Murat the Fifth, and maybe even Mehmet the Sixth. I would personally go for Sultan Mustafa the First just because he was just not fit to be ruler. He was kicked out of power twice because he was just mentally unstable. And the only reason why he became Sultan in the first place was because of various shady characters in the background in the Ottoman government, and of course in the Ottoman imperial family. The fourth question is the most fierce and firmly Sultan in your opinion. I would probably say the most fierce on the battlefield at least would be Yavuz Sultan Selim, aka Selim the First. I think the way he just commanded the Ottoman army on the battlefield, you could just see how of an aggressive expansionist he was. In a matter of 8 years, he conquered half the Middle East, and he really served as the Philip of Macedon to his son, Suleiman the Magnificent. And the last question by Harry S. Truman is the most successful sultan other than Suleiman the First. I mean, I wouldn't even count Suleiman the First as the most successful sultan. I think I would give that honor to Mehmet II. The amount of things he accomplished during his 30-year rule, like conquering Constantinople, of course, conquering various kingdoms around the region, and transforming the Ottoman state into a true empire that would last for centuries after his reign. Thank you for the kind words, Harry S. Truman, and thank you for the questions. Our next questions come from Teddy Roosevelt himself. His first question is, Murat II was underrated and not a popular sultan. Can you tell me why? I think your question relates to modern times, so I think the reason why the reign of Murat II and all of his accomplishments have been kind of overlooked is because his reign is usually placed between two other more famous reigns like Mehmet II and Bayezid I. At least here in the West, we usually talk more about Bayezid I or Yildirim Bayezid and his military accomplishments, and of course the massive military accomplishments of Mehmet the Conqueror. And usually Murat II's reign and his story gets overlooked between those two reigns. The second question is, do you think Bayezid I is amazing as Mehmet II? Personally, I would say no, just because at the end of the day, Bayezid I did get defeated on the battlefield, the Battle of Ankara. Of course, you guys know that, and he was captured and he lived the rest of his life as a prisoner, so I wouldn't say that Bayezid I is amazing as Mehmet II. Alright, the third question is, who, in your opinion, is the second greatest sultan? Mehmet II or Selim I? Well, in my opinion, I think Mehmet II is the best sultan. But if we do have to choose from these two, I would still say Mehmet II. But if we're just going by the second greatest in Ottoman history overall, I would say Suleiman I. The fourth question is, do you think it's appropriate to execute siblings for the throne? I mean, the Ottomans were very famous for this, and it made sense back then, but if you try to convince me today, I would just look at you with a blank face, slowly grab my phone, and call the police. The fifth question is Murat V a great sultan or just a cruel one? Well, he was definitely one of the more talented Ottoman sultans in the 17th century, but overall I would just say he was a cruel sultan. The sixth question is, which sultan do you hate the most? Well, I definitely don't hate any sultans. I look at all the Ottoman sultans as just historical figures to learn about, and yeah, that's pretty much it for that question. And the seventh question is, was Mahmud II correct to kill all the Janissaries? The Janissaries have been loyal for many years, in Ottoman history, of course. I would definitely say that time was up for the Janissaries. Then, the Janissaries at that point were more interested in politics rather than fighting on the battlefield, and I do think Mahmud II was correct in disbanding the Janissaries. It was probably one of the best things to happen to the Ottoman Empire in the 19th century, but that's just my opinion. Again, thank you for the questions, Teddy Roosevelt. Our next question comes from Ali Azar, and he asks your opinion about Ayatollah Ghazi. Congrats, by the way. Well, thank you for the kind words, first of all, and my opinion on Ayatollah Ghazi. Well, I definitely think he was a very important Turkish figure that laid the stones of the Ottoman Empire. And yeah, I really don't have any other opinions other than that. Like with most characters from Ottoman history, I usually look at them as historical figures first, and Ayatollah Ghazi is one of those figures. I know in recent years, Ayatollah Ghazi's popularity around the world has exploded due to a Turkish TV show called Dirilish Ertuğrul, and I do believe it is important to remember that many times when watching a historical TV show that you remember that the characters depicted in the show do not represent the real history behind that real historical figure, especially with historical figures that don't have that much history written about them, like Ertuğrul Gazi. Alright, our last set of questions come from Hassan Nim, and his questions are, how do you pronounce your name? It's pronounced as Ege Güneş, EGE. Last name is Gunes. I live in the Washington, D.C. area. And what inspired you to start your channel? I kind of covered this question in my previous answers. And who was the best and worst Ottoman Sultan in your opinion? I would say Mehmed II and Mustafa I. Alrighty, guys, that wraps up the questions. And once again, I want to thank you for the 10,000 subscribers. And thank you for the questions again. And I'll see you on the next video. Peace out.